Somewhere along the way, maybe after a breakthrough, maybe after a breakdown, something inside you shifted. The old game, chasing, proving, grasping, suddenly cracked. You glimpsed the illusion, you saw the patterns, and then silence. At first it felt powerful, liberating, like stepping outside the noise for the first time. But slowly, almost without notice, the silence didn't feel like freedom anymore. It felt like emptiness, like life turned the volume down and forgot to turn it back up. You stopped caring about things you used to obsess over, not in a reckless or destructive way, more like an existential sigh. And that's when the questions started whispering. Why do I feel so flat, so numb, right after finally seeing the truth? Here's the paradox no one warns you about. We expect awakening to light us up. We expect awakening to pour gasoline on passion. But for many, especially the reflective ones, the empaths, the seekers, it does the opposite. It empties. Carl Jung, father of analytical psychology, anticipated this post-awakening fog long ago. He warned, "Enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that sounds inspiring, until you realize what it really means. Awakening isn't the end. It's the psychological death of who you thought you were. The collapse of the structures that once gave you meaning, goals, ambitions, relationships, even the way you measured time. But here's the catch. Your ego isn't gone. It's confused. It lost the map. And when the old map disintegrates before a new one has formed, motivation vanishes. So no, you're not broken. You're not failing. You're not lazy. You're in between. You've woken up from something, but you haven't yet woken up into something else. And that in-between space, that void, is terrifying, disorienting, and sacred all at once. Most people avoid it. Most try to escape it. But Jung insisted, this stage is essential. Modern life avoids it. Our culture calls it laziness. Our friends call it a slump. But it is neither. It's the cocoon phase, the hermit stage. The moment the caterpillar turns to soup, not a butterfly yet. No longer what you were, just raw material. This is where the ego screams, do something, prove yourself, fix it. But the self whispers something different. Let go. Something deeper is building. That whisper is faint, and most people miss it. Modern spirituality tells you, stay high vibe, follow your joy, think positive. Jung would disagree. Skip the darkness, and you skip the gold. Shadow integration isn't optional. It's the curriculum. This void you're in, it's where the unconscious finally has space to rise. You're not failing. You're metabolizing. Think about it. Where in your life did motivation die the moment illusion cracked? What goal suddenly lost meaning? Not because you failed, but because you saw through it. The pause, the emptiness, the silence. It's not a mistake. It's the beginning of individuation, the slow, painful, necessary process of becoming your truest self. And that's exactly what we're going to unravel next. For most of your life, your motivation came from the mask you wore, what Jung called the persona. That mask had a purpose: gain approval, earn love, keep you safe. It whispered what to chase: recognition, chase achievement, chase belonging, and for a time, it gave your life direction. But awakening rips that mask away. The game is exposed, the rules look absurd, and suddenly nothing tastes the same. It's not that you've become unmotivated. It's that the fuel that once drove you no longer burns. Jung observed that the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is. When that false identity dissolves, so do the ambitions tied to it, and the self begins recalibrating. It rejects anything fake, forced, or ego-based. That includes relationships, jobs, even the dream boards you once swore by. The ego loses its map, and the soul hasn't yet handed you a new one. That's why you feel like an actor who's walked off stage and can't remember their lines. You've stepped out of one story, but the next story hasn't begun. That's why awakening is both liberating and destabilizing. Jung cautioned, "Stop here and you'll stall." This is where spiritual bypass creeps in. Nothing matters. It's all illusion. You disconnect, float, numb out. Detachment gets mistaken for disengagement. But the self wants something different, to live through you. Not to escape the world, but to redefine your part in it. To reach that, you enter a strange middle chapter Jung nailed, and most miss while they're inside it. This isn't laziness. It isn't even clinical depression. It's a transitional state, a dismantling of ego-based motivation before deeper meaning emerges. Imagine standing in a familiar room, but all the furniture has been removed. The walls are the same, but everything that made it feel like home is gone. That's where you are now. What if your emptiness isn't evidence of failure, but proof you've outgrown the illusion that once drove you? This is why Jung framed individuation as a death and rebirth process. The death of the mask, the death of false certainty, and the wait for the authentic self to surface. When you look at the goals that used to excite you, do they now feel foreign? Like you're chasing someone else's dream? That disorientation isn't proof you're lost. It's evidence you're no longer willing to live a life that doesn't belong to you. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Because this limbo, this in-between, is not a mistake. It's the passage Jung hinted at, but few ever talk about. And if you understand it, you'll realize your stillness is not the end of awakening. It's the necessary threshold before something deeper begins. Most people expect awakening to feel like a permanent high, light pouring in, endless clarity, a constant sense of purpose. But the truth? Awakening has a stage almost no one warns you about. It isn't glamorous. It doesn't trend. After the initial spark, many experience the opposite, a sense that the script has been ripped from your hands. It looks like sitting in silence, staring at the ceiling while the world rushes past. Not depression, not apathy. The sacred pause. Carl Jung warned that modern society is terrified of this silence. In ancient traditions, this was recognized as initiation, the threshold between death and rebirth. In Jungian terms, this is not regression. It's enantiodromia, the psyche swinging into its opposite. You've spent years striving, proving, performing. Awakening flips the pendulum. Suddenly, you feel pulled into stillness, into withdrawal, into nothing. And that nothing terrifies the ego. Because the ego equates value with productivity. You go from, "I must do everything," to "why do anything at all?" And that swing is sacred. It's how balance is restored. If you're not chasing, it whispers, you're failing. But your soul knows better. What if your lack of drive isn't evidence of collapse, but proof your psyche is quietly rebuilding itself? Nietzsche once wrote, "You must be willing to burn in your own flame." How could you rise anew if you haven't first become ashes? This pause is that fire, not punishment, preparation. Jung believed individuation required this hermit phase, where the unconscious finally has space to rise. You don't bypass the shadow, you face it. Your psyche is wise. It will stall your drive and clarity on purpose. So you're forced to feel, witness, reclaim what you buried. The grief, the anger, the hidden truths. That's the real work. Not to punish you, to prepare you. Your system deliberately strips away old motivation so that deeper instincts, archetypes, and truths can surface. Where have you mistaken pause for paralysis? Where have you judged yourself for slowing down, when slowing down was the very medicine your soul required? Because here's the paradox. When you stop resisting the void, something subtle begins to stir. Not the old fire of ego chasing status, but a quieter flame that won't burn out when life gets hard. That's what we'll reveal in the next section. At first, the pause feels endless. You wonder if the spark will ever come back. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts. Motivation returns, but it's different now. It doesn't roar with urgency, it hums with alignment. Carl Jung described this as the emergence of the self, when you no longer live from the mask of persona, but from the deeper center of your being. You've walked through the hollow. Now there's a gentle pull, not back to your old life, but toward a truer one. Old goals stop pulling you because they belong to the ego's script. Success, approval, validation, none of it fits anymore. Instead, a new compass arises. Practically, it sounds like better questions. Not what should I do, but what's quietly calling me. Not what's the plan, but where is life nudging me. Not how do I prove myself, but what feels true. Ambition doesn't vanish, it transforms. It becomes devotion to truth, presence, growth. Ironically, that gets more done than ego ever did. And it's sustainable. You start creating even when no one is watching. You decline opportunities that look perfect on paper, but feel hollow in your chest. You choose peace over performance. And for the first time, it feels like progress. What if your drive was never supposed to be about achievement, but about expression? Søren Kierkegaard warned that despair comes from living as someone you are not. This new flame is the antidote. It doesn't ask for applause. It asks for honesty. This is the stage where individuation takes root. The unconscious isn't something to battle anymore. It becomes guidance. Through dreams, intuition, synchronicity, your psyche shifts from being externally fueled to soul-powered. Where in your life are you still chasing the ego's fire, instead of listening for the quieter flame within? Because here's the final truth. Living from the self doesn't mean the struggle ends. It means you carry a flame that can't be extinguished by the world's storms. Let's explore how that flame reshapes ambition, purpose, and meaning. When you awaken, the old fire dies. The fire of proving, of chasing, of trying to earn your place. That collapse feels terrifying at first, but only because you mistake it for emptiness. In truth, it's a clearing. The ashes of the old self make space for the self to emerge. Carl Jung called this the symbolic life, living not from the persona's checklist, but from the soul's center. It doesn't move from fear of missing out. It moves from resonance. Ego-fueled ambition says, run faster, be more, get ahead. Self-fueled ambition whispers, express what is true, serve what is real, create what only you can. This shift doesn't just change what you do, it changes why you do it. What if your highest purpose isn't about striving at all, but about aligning? Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Awakening doesn't erase the struggles of life, it transforms the why beneath them. This is why your new motivation feels so steady. It's not adrenaline, it's not desperation, it's devotion. The self isn't here to impress, it's here to express. What have you been chasing that no longer resonates? And what is quietly calling you now, even if it doesn't make sense yet? Because here's the paradox most never realize. Awakening doesn't end in detachment. It ends in deeper embodiment. And once you follow the self's flame, life stops being about survival and becomes about meaning. So if you've been drifting in the silence after awakening, if the spark that once drove you feels gone, know this: you haven't failed. You've outgrown the fire that was never meant to last. The one that burned on validation. The one that flickered when others withheld approval. That flame had to collapse, so a deeper one could ignite. Carl Jung never promised the path would be easy, but he promised it was necessary. And if you're here, listening, you're already walking it. He showed us that wholeness requires descent before ascent, shadow before light, death before rebirth. And what you're living now is not collapse, it's initiation. The void isn't punishment, it's the womb of the self. The butterfly doesn't crawl out of the cocoon with its old hunger for leaves. It emerges with wings. It doesn't run. It remembers how to fly. That's you, not broken, not apathetic, not lazy, becoming. It was never about getting your old motivation back. It was about discovering the new fuel, one rooted in wholeness, not performance. This isn't the end of awakening. This is the individuation process Jung spoke of. The long arc of becoming the self, where the unconscious is integrated and life stops being about survival and becomes about meaning. If you felt this strange stillness, drop in the comments. I lost the fire, but I ignited the flame. Subscribe if you want more content where psychology, philosophy, and awakening converge. And share this with someone who feels stuck in the silence, so they can see it's not the end, it's the beginning.